So second storyline here. Positive. I'm looking forward to the positive. Bryce Miller. That dude carved the Brewers up on Saturday. Man, does he look much improved from last year.
Best start he's ever had. Period. Think about this against lefties. We spent plenty of time in the offseason talking about how bad Bryce Miller was against lefties and how important it was that both him and Wu figure out a way to get lefties out. You know what lefties were on Saturday against the Brewers? 0 for 13 with 4 strikeouts. Now, that doesn't just happen by chance. That comes with the evolution of Bryce Miller. Think about this. Think about Bryce Miller's first couple of starts in the big leagues. He was 60 to 70% four-seam fastball. He had his 2 sliders, the bullet slider and the sweeper, and that's about it. That's what Bryce did. He tried to live off his fastball. And as the season caught up to him, he couldn't just go 60 to 70% fastball because he'd get hammered. People would hunt fastballs and they would hit it over the fence. We know Bryce Miller's fastball mix was on Saturday against the Brewers. He dropped it all the way down to 36% through 2 starts this season. 36% four-seam fastballs for Bryce Miller through 2 starts. That's a remarkable evolution for Bryce Miller because he finally has, it seems like, other pitches to rely upon that keep hitters honest, and that he has what he thinks a viable attack strategy to both lefties and righties, and it has been effective so far.
Bryce Miller is throwing way more pitches than I expected him to in terms of his arsenal. Last year, to build off what you just talked about, combine his fastball and slider usage 77% of the time. Those were his 2 pitches. And I think part of the reason the second half was a bit of a struggle for him, teams caught up to that, especially the Rangers, especially the Astros. They started to time him up. Look at what he's doing now. Yes, this is through 2 starts, but his fastball is being used through 2 starts, like you mentioned, about 36% of the time. Splitters are 23% of the time, sinkers at 17%, sliders at 14%, and the sweepers at 7%. That is a healthy, balanced breakfast right there. That is a perfect variation of a bunch of different pitches that right now through 2 starts, a lot of them are working for Bryce. We talked about the splitter. It looks awesome. We'll continue to talk about how awesome the splitter looks. But the fact he's throwing 5 pitches at somewhat of a consistent percentage, that matters. Not only is that going to help him get lefties out more often, it's going to help keep hitters so much more off balance rather than only having to try to time up 2 pitches, which is what he was basically throwing at the end of last year.
Bryce knows he can use his fastball to get righties out. Like, that's what he did last year. He would use his fastball, and righties would have a hard time with the ride on that pitch. Well, now he has the balance of using his splitter against lefties, which when he throws his splitter, it's truly a guessing game. That thing is like half splitter, half knuckleball of where it goes when it comes out of his hand. It is going all sorts of different directions when it comes out of his hand. It could run arm side, it could go glove side, it could go straight. Regardless, it's dropping, and hitters are having a really hard time swinging at the pitch. 52% whiff rate so far on that splitter. And he threw some splitters against the Brewers on Saturday that I thought were sweepers. I thought that was his cannonball, but it wasn't his cannonball. It was his splitter. You go back and look, splitter's the one that's logged as all the strikeouts. He did use his sweeper. He does throw it. But it's nice that he no longer has to use that pitch as a strikeout pitch because, as we saw last year, it's not really a strikeout pitch. He couldn't get strikeouts on that pitch. People were fouling it off, but he wasn't getting whiffs on that pitch. His splitter's a whiff pitch, just like his fastball is a whiff pitch. So if he can throw the off speed to throw the splitter to keep guys off his fastball, and then vice versa, with his fastball, he'll sneak one by you. What a combo.
Yeah. 100% what a combo. And it kept all those Brewers hitters off balance. It was like we talked about in the Red Sox start, too. I thought he looked good in the Red Sox start. He had a couple of hard hit balls that got the best of him, but a check swing that was a bad call by the umpires did not help his luck. And then it resulted in a couple of hard hit balls. But aside from that, I thought his outing against Boston looked really sharp. But he only built on that in Milwaukee. 7 shutout innings, 3 hits, didn't give up a run. He struck out 7. That's an outing right there. That doesn't look like a number 4 starter. That looks like a guy who had a hell of an offseason, got in the lab, said, okay, I know I need more of a variance of pitches, and now comes back in 2024 pretty transformed. He still has the four-seam fastball that works well against righties. He does a lot of different stuff now. It was crazy about that splitter, too. They sunk it up. Somebody posted a chart. It was sunk up against Kevin Gausman's, which is the model splitter in baseball. It's probably the best splitter in baseball. And Gausman's usually stays in the same spot. But to your point, what you were talking about with Miller's, it's all over the place. It's not very easy. Even if you're going to try and time it up and you know it's coming, you don't always know where it's going to land. Gausman's, as good as it is, usually lands in the same spot. Miller's goes everywhere. And that's a good thing because you can't time it up.
And we'll see if that normalizes. I'm curious to see if it normalizes as the season goes along. Usually with the bigger sample, stuff like that might go into the same movement profile, but it might not. So we're gonna have to see. That's truly fascinating. One other thing that stood out to me about Bryce, that sinker kind of snuck up on me. I wasn't expecting how effective that pitch would be, but it resulted in not a whole lot of hard contact when he was throwing it. If it's going to be at like a third of your pitches, you still don't want that pitch to get hammered at all, but it wasn't. It was having a good amount of arm side movement into righties, away to lefties, a fastball variant to get guys off his four-seamer, and it worked. And yeah, it is very, very good to see. So how about the overall through two starts? How about these numbers against lefties this season? A 194 weighted on base average and a 26% strikeout rate against lefties. That will play.
That sounds pretty good. That sounds pretty good, as Larry David would say.
Mm-hmm.
Should we talk about what unfolded when he came out of the game? Because I do have this in my notes. I don't know if you have much on it, but people obviously had their gripes because Bryce Miller was at less than 80 pitches through 7 innings. They yanked him out of the game and went to the bullpen. And I think a lot of people on Twitter were really mad that they didn't keep him in. And I appreciate Scott Service for this because the media asked him what the reasoning was behind the decision the next day or after the game and then a little bit more the next day too. And Scott gave a very detailed, in-depth answer to it. Ryan Divish did a big thread on it with a bunch of quotes from Scott about it. And he gave a very, very detailed explanation. And there's a lot that went into it. For those of you who think that they're just making a heat of the moment decision saying, you know what, I've seen enough, we're going to take him out. There's real thought that goes behind this. And I'm not going to go for 5 minutes about everything that Scott said. But if you just want a 30-second Spark Notes version of what kind of went into it, going through the lineup a fourth time played a factor. The fact Bryce Miller is not as built up as Logan, George, and Luis plays a factor, along with it being his second start of the season. And they also gave a couple of scenarios. This is what Scott said to the media. They said, okay, let's say we let Bryce go back out for the 8th inning, but we give him 2 batters. Well, then what happens? We bring in Spire if we give him 2 batters. Then Gabe Spire doesn't get the matchup we wanted him to have because instead of facing a lefty, he would face a right-handed pinch hitter, which doesn't favor him. Obviously, Gabe's great at getting lefties out. Scott said, okay, what if we let Bryce go for 3 hitters in the 8th inning, and then we still have to finish the job? Then you get Austin Voth in against William Contreras, who they did not want Bryce to face again because Contreras had the best at-bats against him that day. And Contreras, sure, that's a fine matchup for Voth, but after that, then it becomes Yelich. Yelich is a bad matchup for Voth, and Service talked about that. They didn't want Voth facing Yelich. I went a little longer than 30 seconds there, but you see where I'm getting at here? This is not Scott Service saying, yeah, I've watched enough. You're done for the day. There are meetings that go on all day with all these situations that get played out and all these different factors that go into their decisions. It's well thought out. You can agree with it. You can disagree with it. You can believe that Bryce Miller still should have gone out there for the 8th inning. That's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But don't think Scott Service, Jerry Dipoto, Justin Hollander, and the entire Mariners pitching group is not putting real thought into this because they are.
That was a really good explanation by Scott. I'm glad he put the detail into there. And just for people to remember as well, the result of what came in, like what happened to the bullpen after which they nearly blew the lead, is independent of the decision Scott Service is making. Scott Service is not pulling Bryce out of there expecting his bullpen to blow a lead, right? Mm-hmm. He's pulling it based on matchups. And if the matchups don't execute and the pitchers don't execute, well, that's a completely independent problem of pulling Bryce out. Mind that. There were a lot of people, I'm going to admit myself included, that was sitting there perplexed in the 8th inning as it seems like the lead is slinking away. And oh boy, this show might have been a little bit worse if that lead had been blown on Saturday as well, and the Mariners would be just in sort of early season free fall if they hadn't held on to that lead. But thankfully, actually, we got a pretty good outing to end on Sunday. So Andres Munoz ended on a high note, and everyone can breathe, and there's at least some to end a positive note here in the first week plus of the season. So,
yeah, I like, don't get me wrong, I was confused too, right in the moment, for why he got taken out. Aaron Goldsmith and Mike Blowers were talking about it on the broadcast. They said there does have to be some thought that goes into your mind, right, of why did Bryce Miller leave this game? They were talking about it, and Goldie did by no means like question managerial decisions. He wasn't saying that. He was having a conversation, obviously, about, okay, there's got to be some people that are thinking this. But then when you listen to Scott after the game, again, guys, this is all thought out. This is not them making spur of the moment decisions because I feel like doing this. No, there's a plan. Whether you agree you should have been taken out or not, there's a plan.
So the wording of that is, if it was Castillo, Logan, or Kirby, they're out there in the 8th inning probably without question.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
But Bryce isn't there yet. He's not built up enough. Now, if we're talking, this is in September when you've got playoff races on the line and Bryce Miller is more built up, and then he's at a 7-inning shutout outing at less than 80 pitches, I bet you he goes out then. Yeah. But it's also his second start of the year in early April. So that's part of it too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad Scott gave that explanation and solved one of the great mysteries of the early season. So that's good. No need to call in Sherlock Holmes for this one.